Marcus Whitfield had never wanted a camera in his house. His head of security wanted it there, and in the end Marcus signed off the way he signed off on most things he didn't have the bandwidth to argue about. Quickly, and with a knot in his stomach he didn't examine too closely. It wasn't that he suspected Nora Bell of anything. It was that he was afraid of everything he couldn't see, and Nora saw his daughters for 11 hours a day that he did not. His daughters were 7-year-old twins, Ren and Sadie. Their mother had died 14 months earlier, quickly and without warning, the kind of loss that doesn't give a family time to prepare a single sentence for it. Sadie had grieved the way books said children grieve. Tears, questions, slow healing. Ren had gone quiet. Not sad quiet, silent. She hadn't spoken a full sentence in 10 months. The specialists called it selective mutism brought on by trauma, and they said the same thing every time: patience, safety, time. No forcing, no pressure. Let her find her way back to her own voice. Marcus ran a logistics company with operations on 3 continents, and he had gotten very good in the last year at doing that job with half his attention while the other half stayed in a house he wasn't in. Nora Bell had been hired 8 weeks earlier as a live-in caregiver and household manager. She was 29, unhurried in a way Marcus found almost unsettling in a house that ran on urgency, and she had a habit, in her interview, of talking directly to the girls instead of about them. She'd knelt down in front of Ren, who said nothing back, and told her it was nice to meet her, and then hadn't seemed bothered at all by the silence that followed. She started on a Tuesday. The camera went in 3 weeks later. Marcus watched the footage in short bursts. Late at night, the way a man checks a wound he's afraid is worse than it looks. For 2 weeks, the footage showed him nothing but competence. Meals on time, homework supervised, Sadie chattering the way Sadie always chattered, Ren present but silent, the way Ren always was. Then, on the 15th night, he watched something he replayed 4 times before he trusted it. Before we go further, if you believe the quiet, patient people in a child's life are often doing the most important work nobody claps for, hit like, subscribe to Enlightened Story, and stay with me because this one earns it. It was 4:40 in the afternoon, the hour the girls usually did homework at the kitchen table. Instead, Nora was sitting cross-legged on the floor of the playroom with a battered paperback in her lap, and both girls sitting across from her, and she was not reading to them. She was reading with a puppet. A sock puppet, plain and a little ridiculous, worn on her left hand, and she was doing every voice in the book through it. Funny voices, bad voices, voices that made Sadie shriek with laughter. And every few pages, she'd turn to the puppet and ask it a question directly. What do you think happens next, Ferdinand? And hold it out toward Ren. Not toward Ren. Toward the puppet's audience, which happened to include Ren. Marcus watched his silent daughter lean forward. He watched her mouth move. No sound reached the microphone, but her lips shaped 2 words, and Nora's whole face changed, and she said, delighted, Ferdinand agrees with you completely, and kept reading like nothing remarkable had happened at all. Marcus sat at his desk on the other side of an ocean and did not move for a long time. He watched the next night. Same time, same floor, a different book. The puppet renamed halfway through to Sir Reginald because Sadie had insisted. Ren whispered something to the puppet again, longer this time, 3 or 4 words, and Nora never once looked directly at Ren while it happened. She kept her eyes on the puppet, on the page, anywhere but on the child, as if she understood, without anyone explaining it to her, that being watched was the one thing Ren couldn't survive yet. By the end of the week, Ren was whispering full sentences to a sock with button eyes, and laughing, actually laughing out loud, at Sadie's insistence that Sir Reginald needed a cape. If you're wondering how someone learns to do this without being taught to do it in a textbook, stay with me because Nora didn't learn this from a manual. She learned it from being on the other end of silence herself, and we'll get there. But first, if this story is landing, drop a comment telling me who taught you patience, and subscribe to Enlightened Story so you don't miss where this goes. Nora had grown up the middle child in a house with an older brother who stopped speaking for almost a year after a car accident took their father when Nora was 10. She remembered exactly what had helped him, not the therapists, though they'd mattered, but her mother's rule that nobody was allowed to ask him, "Are you ready to talk yet?" Instead, her mother had started reading aloud after dinner, every night, no expectations attached, until one evening her brother interrupted the story to correct a detail she'd gotten wrong, and that was the whole miracle. Not a breakthrough, correction, an unguarded, ordinary sentence. Nora had never forgotten that the way back to a voice is rarely dramatic. It's a puppet with a name. It's permission to talk to something instead of someone. It's an adult who's willing to look away at exactly the right moment. She'd found Ferdinand, soon to be Sir Reginald, in a donation bin behind the community center where she used to volunteer, and she'd been quietly using him with children for 6 years before she ever set foot in the Whitfield house. Marcus flew home on a Thursday, for days after the first whisper. He came in through the side door at 4:35, 5 minutes before puppet time, and stood in the hallway outside the playroom without announcing himself, the way he'd learned to from watching 100 versions of this exact hallway on a screen. Sadie saw him first and nearly launched Sir Reginald across the room in her excitement to tell him everything. Ren saw him a half-second later, and her face did something Marcus hadn't seen in 10 months. Surprise, and underneath the surprise, something that looked almost like relief that he was the one seeing it. She didn't speak, not yet, but she held up the puppet toward him, an offering, and Marcus knelt down on the playroom floor in his work clothes and said, "Hi, Sir Reginald. I hear you've had quite a week," and Ren Ren's mouth curved. Not quite a smile, not quite not one, and she pushed the puppet an inch closer to her father, which was its own kind of sentence. Later, after the girls were in bed, Marcus found Nora in the kitchen and asked her the question he'd been rehearsing on the flight. How long has she been talking to it? 9 days, Nora said. I wasn't going to make it a thing. If I'd made it a thing, she'd have stopped. You didn't tell me. I was going to, when there was something solid to tell you, instead of a hope. She looked at him steadily. Hope's fragile in a house like this one right now. I didn't want to hand you one that might not hold. He asked her, then, the only question that mattered. What do you need? Not for the job. For you. She was quiet for a moment, the way people are quiet when they're deciding whether an offer is real. Then she told him about the community program she volunteered for on her one day off, chronically underfunded, always one bad month from closing, the place she'd learned, over years of watching, exactly what Ren needed before anyone had put a name to it. Marcus wrote the number down. Not to fix it, to make it possible, which he understood now was a different thing entirely. 6 weeks later, at dinner, Ren told her sister, out loud, in her own voice, no puppet in sight, that she didn't think Sir Reginald needed a cape after all. Capes were impractical for a sock, and Sadie argued back immediately, and Marcus sat at the end of the table and listened to his daughters disagree with each other and thought it was the best sound he'd heard in over a year. If this one got you, like the video, tell me in the comments what small, patient thing helped someone you love find their way back, and subscribe to Enlightened Story. We're just getting started, and we're so glad you're here.